Hello and welcome. I'm Helen Atkinson, Senior Editor at Supply Chain Brain. I'm excited to be moderating this webinar today, sponsored by 7Bridges, the topic for which is, are you leaving millions on the floor by ignoring AI? Modern supply chains are dealing with more complexity, more disruption, and more expectations than ever before. And all of that adds up to more costs. But modern supply chains also have something extra going for them, heaps and heaps of big, juicy data. While that huge pool of data can feel overwhelming, when it gets paired with artificial intelligence, or AI, that all changes. With the right tools, even the most complicated supply chains with the densest of data can be smoother, smarter, and save your company incredible amounts of money. In this webinar, we're going to take you through how AI can make your business more resilient. Everyone wants that. The biggest areas you can see savings through AI, how to avoid total data overload. I definitely want to know about that. And why bringing AI into your supply chain is easier than you thought. We're also going to talk about how to take your first steps towards AI-driven supply chains. So we're going to start with a presentation about the work 7Bridges is doing in AI with the help of an independent expert and consultant. Then I'll be firing questions at both of them in a panel discussion. After the panel, we'll move to a Q&A session with questions from you in the audience. Please submit questions at any time using the tab at the bottom of your screen. We will not be using people's titles or company names, so go ahead and ask anything you like. If you don't see your question answered during the webinar, please be assured the 7Bridges team will reach out to you offline. Right. I want to extend a warm welcome to Corey Haley, Solutions Engineer at 7Bridges. Corey is a forward-thinking senior solutions professional who has had the privilege to work with some of the brightest founders and brands globally. Corey works with the team at 7Bridges to bring the benefits of its AI-powered supply chain platform to customers. And then I'm excited to introduce Bobby Bain. He's principal consultant and owner of Professional Supply Chain Resources. Bobby has worked in supply chain and logistics for more than 30 years for companies such as FedEx, Bristol-Myers Squibb, Eli Lilly, and Celgene Pharmaceuticals. He retired from Big Pharma and now owns his own consulting company, where he currently works as an executive consultant in the life sciences vertical. Welcome, gentlemen. Let's kick off with Corey telling us a little bit about 7Bridges. Corey, tell us what 7Bridges does and why you're here today.
Cheers. Thanks for that, Helen. As mentioned, I'm Corey Haley, and I'm a solutions engineer at 7Bridges, and I'm super pleased to be here with all of you. Let's face it, the world relies on supply chains that can adapt quickly and are integrated, agile, and data-driven. That's where 7Bridges comes in. As a platform based on end-to-end supply chain management, we offer more than just visibility. We give you the ability to understand the impact of every decision made, big and small. With our AI, you can spot problems before they even happen, make integral changes at the push of a button with data-driven proof that it actually works, and have a total understanding of how your supply chain can perform, but also the flexibility and advantage of working offline to understand how changes to your network might impact performance, cost, or more. I'm delighted, absolutely delighted to be joined by Bobby. For full transparency, Bobby works very closely with us through a mutual customer who we're going to refer to quite often in today's presentation. We're going to refer to them as Pharmacy. And he's been a supply chain professional for over 30 years. And as you know, he works with some of the top organizations that are out there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Corey. Bobby, please tell us a little bit. I know Corey's introduced you, but tell me perhaps a little bit about what really interests you most about AI in the supply chain and how you bring value to that.
Thanks, Helen. What really is my biggest piece is looking at supply chain as a whole globally and trying to figure out how to make decisions with all this amounts of data, all the different variables to execute precisely what you need to happen when in an ever-changing environment. I see speed always combats the reaction time. And that's what AI can do for me and has done for me.
That's wonderful. Thank you, gentlemen, for setting the scene. Let's get started with the presentation. Take it away.
Great, thanks, Helen. Well, before we get into the tagline of saving millions, let's just talk really quickly about resilience overall and what's got us talking about supply chains around the dinner table lately. After a third year now of COVID impacts, mapped to the increased delivery expectations of our customers, ongoing physical and regulatory impacts of climate change, and now what appears to be a global recession at our doorstep, supply chains have taken a lot of knocks. But they've also taken a more prominent place in the general awareness of Joe Public. This gives supply chains the power to really drive transformation in a way that they hadn't before. Because now supply chain resilience is both highly necessary for success, but it's not necessarily guaranteed. So I don't know how Bobby feels, but for the first time in a really long time, when I'm out in the social world and people ask, what do you do for a living? Because, well, weather's pretty passe. But when I say I work with a company trying to build smarter supply chains for the benefit of everyone, all of a sudden I'm a popular guy at the party. Now, at Seven Bridges, we really do believe that smarter supply chains benefit everyone. I think the folks on the call might agree with that as well. But we have to focus on what resilient supply chains are. And those are ones that really have robust capabilities across 3 pillars. And the pillars we identify really as data, visibility, and innovation. Now, the data pillar overall means having supply chain data that's both accessible and usable, and that you're capable of using that data actually to drive decision making. With that, there's some really great overlap with the second pillar, which is visibility. Having data isn't enough. When it sits inside data lakes, or worse yet, and this is kind of the fingers on the chalkboard, if it's sitting in Excel, it's understandable to know why you don't really know what your data is telling you. The visibility pillar is all about being able to see both far and deep into your supply chain, and even into your provider network and previously disconnected systems that might be attached to your supply chain. Leading into the third pillar overall on innovation, well, we've seen a lot of great logos pop up in the last 5 years supporting supply chain efforts from a technology perspective. But for us here at Seven Bridges, being able to offer our clients the tools and resources to make immediate improvements to their network, reclaim lost cost and overspends, and to reduce the manual menial tasks associated with the supply chain function really lies at the heart of our innovative approach. We're a SaaS-based solution with a dedicated team of data analysts and a customer success team to really move organizations progressively forward. So making this focused a little bit more on real life examples. When we first started working with the company we're referring to as Pharmacy, with Bobby, they were really struggling to get beyond what was considered a post-Brexit supply chain. A recent move of a distribution center to Europe, and a pretty big gap in overall resilience. Couple that with highly variable and unpredictable rates from providers, multiple accounts, multiple rate structures, and really not enough data visibility, and thus no resources to go and fare better in the world of negotiations. They had no clarity on how to best utilize their transport providers to really meet the customer needs. Now, Bobby, you work closely with Pharmacy. Where have they come since working with Seven Bridges?
Well, it's been more standardized approach working with Seven Bridges, where we are able to understand more of the data and what we're being charged, what type of visibility that we have. And we're excited about it. We're excited about how we're able to now take data and do something with it. We had the data all along, but we didn't really know what we could do with it, or what we wanted to do with it. Now we have more of a structure to be able to make decisions, be more proactive, and have better service. Whereas also looking at what we're being charged and being able to say, this isn't what we agreed to in the contracts.
Thanks, Bobby.
So yeah, what does resilient and where is it going? Supply chains look like and where it's going. It's just an extension of what I just said. We're looking at, we're able to look at the global picture better. We're in 40 different countries. We have different complexities through our manufacturing, through our supply chain, and planning and forecasting, along with logistics and moving products all over the world. The data now encompasses in different segments where we can take a look at it. We can use the automation of AI, and then we can provide that overall what's happening, and the picture and landscapes are looking more positive. And put this into the spectrum. We're servicing our customers, my clients' customers, more satisfactory, as well as we're able to manage our partners that do the 3PLs or do the outsourcing and logistic transport for us. It's better. It's been much better.
Thanks for that, Bobby. I think that brings us back to the first pillar of data. And let's be honest, that when we talk about data overall, I feel like my role as a solutions engineer, in the first instance, when we're talking about pre-sales and working with new prospects, I get moved very much into a new interesting role, almost as a supply chain data therapist, because organizations are struggling with what we call data overwhelm. It happens very easily. It tends to be a symptom of either too much or too little or really messy data. And well, that's how it feels, at least. But often there's really underlying causes of why that data is producing that overwhelmed feeling. But it all results in the same thing, which to me, I see as decision paralysis, where we're not able to make decisions about where do we go, where do we start, how do we know that our spend is optimal, for example. But when we take it back to a real life example, the pharmacy example, when we started working with them, the first step was to look at, they had over 120 accounts, which really limited their visibility. And as a result, they had almost zero negotiating power because there was so many accounts. It was almost impossible to start to untangle the web and decipher what an optimal mix may even be. So certainly understood where the starting point. Bobby, have you seen that data overwhelm happen in other clients?
Yeah, pretty much everywhere I've worked. There are areas obviously where you have a handle on it, but it happens all the time. No one's really immune to that. I've always said, data is just as good as what you can do with it, and that's exactly. If you can't manage, or you can have all the data in the world, but if you can't manage it, what good is it to have the data in the first place? So with the companies that I've worked with, it's an ongoing problem that we have to resolve.
Agree. And I think this is how do we get over this data overwhelm, aside from visiting counseling sessions overall. But for me, I think that the first thing to remember when you hit this overwhelm in this decision paralysis, it's just this: it's your data is still workable. I've yet to be introduced to an organization where we couldn't make sense of what they had, and if not that, be able to point them in the direction of where some really robust, interesting starting points could look like. The data problems that I think they're a symptom internally, and if you just ask for a little bit of help, your organizations, for the folks on the call, are certainly focused on producing a product or a service or the thing. Our business is really understanding data. So the advice I give in that space is really just hand over the data to those who have the data analysis and skill sets and platforms to be able to start to make sense of it all. How hard is it, Bobby, for companies to trust outside organizations to start to make sense of their data?
Well, it's very difficult. I would say prior to my consulting, when I worked for big pharma, I'd get people in all the time that said, that they can successfully manage this process. So there's so many people out there. But then I would say out of that, only a few handful that actually can really do it, or at least look at it from an end-to-end standpoint. So it's difficult, Corey. You're having to entrust somebody that you just met versus, because it's AI is so new, the reputation and getting the right reputation out there, at least from the way I see it, it's difficult, and sometimes entrusting is acquired.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what might be helpful is if we explain to the folks on today's webinar, really, how do we start? And what's that first step really towards AI? And at Seven Bridges, the first step in transformation is really about invoice auditing. We ingest all those messy rate cards. We ingest all invoices from logistics provider, your contracts, as well as any unusual spot rates or traditional spot rates and long-term agreements into the platform. And we use our AI in parallel to start establishing what your baseline looks like. And what that means is our AI looks at what you're spending, how your network performs, and which providers you can actually access. After that initial baseline's created, we automate the pulling of those invoices on a go-forward basis, as well as any updates to your contracts, spot rates, or whatever else you might be receiving from logistics providers. The process has a few really important and useful benefits. One, there's no IT integration required here. We're able to pull all this information by either working with your service providers and or receiving your invoice data in the same way you receive it, whether that's through a billing platform or through emails, looking at those messy PDFs and the Excel attachments. But all that data overwhelm is going to get tackled right up front. We're going to start to build out that baseline piece. And in cases like pharmacy, where they aren't on standardized rate cards, the provider network obviously got a bit complicated, and we're here to help standardize that and to give that visibility back to the client. But mostly, it's really a great first step because it gives you results right away. So in the auditing of that invoice world and playing that back against the rate cards and the actual execution of those orders, we're starting to generate some ROI right out of the gate. So you're starting to not only build out this world of what we would consider call a digital twin in the next step, but at the same time, it's starting to pay for itself. I've yet to see an organization where we haven't been able to provide at least somewhere between the 5 to 15% value in those erroneous invoice charges that the AI is easily able and capable of picking up. Now, Bobby, we've talked before about invoice auditing and the role it plays in supply chain transformation, and you had a few really great points about that. Do you mind sharing with the audience?
Yeah, sure, Corey. Yeah, this is a unique deliverable that I see that has been a great impact as it relates to standardizing rates amongst all of your integrators or specialty providers. And first of all, it provides a power of negotiation back to those to make sure that you're executing an MSA or contract in the correct way. You're setting up the codes where it's not for them to the service provider to provide one rate on one lane one day and then provide a whole different one the other day. It really standardizes the practices, and we can we end up with huge savings potential by doing that. The other thing I realize I want to stress is without this, you're managing and you're spending all this time getting the right language into the contract, but you don't have this technology that oversees what the contract states versus what your performance. So at the end of the day, you're getting charged outside those contracted rates, and you don't even realize it unless you have somebody that backs it up and is able to provide this type of automation tools. So it's been eye-opening for me, and it's been really a great process going forward.
That's great. Thanks. But I often call that the needle in the haystack approach, where you're getting invoice data in, there's thousands of shipments, multiple Excel files built on top of them. And to really spot those errors or those overcharges really can't be done with the naked eye. I mean, that's where the power of a platform, the power of being able to run those algorithms against invoices, but all of a sudden you start to create that. I think the other interesting thing is the format by which we share that with partners, whether that's in instantaneous refund request or credit note request based on something being missed, or whether our clients take a more strategic approach of collecting those miscues, those credits, those areas where service levels weren't met, to take those into procurement conversations and take those into quarterly business reviews. So it's been really interesting to see how people have used the data that we're able to share back with them. So after your company, assuming you've jumped on this invoice auditing trail, is in a place and data starting to make sense, new routes to AI-driven decisions start to open up to you. Now, one thing the auditing process does is it starts to map out your provider network, as we talked about. And that does form the basis of your digital twin. A few more touch points and data points into that world, and all of a sudden we're able to build out a full digital twin for your organization. And once you get there, it actually unlocks the ability to use our platform to start to do some very complex scenario planning and modeling to really start to challenge your current network and your network of the future around this idea of resilience. We also then, when we move beyond the platform approach from a scenario perspective, other AI-powered tools that sit on top of our platform, something like our automated send platform, which uses AI at the center of it to determine what is the best provider to send that shipment on, based on what your company deems as best, whether that's cost, whether that's speed, or whether that's performance. But having that alignment and booking straight through, starting to take away some of these menial tasks that a lot of organizations see still happening in their warehouse environments. That decision of which carrier do I select off of a simple S&OP document to say this parcel, this geography, this carrier. You're able to lay in some intelligence around that and give your organization one single environment to keep a track of that shipment from its end-to-end life and its journey through its final destination. I think what I want to be able to highlight here is when you plug a tool like our platform into your supply chain, you're really starting to enhance things. And it doesn't have to be a big, enormous project. People tend to talk about transformation in terms of 5-year projects or to hit a 2030 goal. You can really transform your supply chain in a step-by-step way that feels natural to you. And it builds on itself. And it provides the return on investment in the early days to really start to fund the forward initiatives that we might see. So where did this leave us when it comes to our classic example here of pharmacy? Well, off the back of a 2-week implementation project, so some really heads down work, pharmacy used the 7 Bridges platform to audit all the invoices from all of their providers, which this project then enabled a 12-month ROI of 6x and a total savings of around 15%. Now, in one region alone, the cost savings were as high as 40%, just through that mismatch of provider, lane, service rate, enabling pharmacy to really better focus on the needs of their customers. Over the 2 years since then, that number has risen massively. In real terms, that meant over £1.5 million in annual savings, a better negotiating position with their providers, increased end-to-end visibility on how their supply chain was performing, and greater granularity into that supply chain data. Now, thinking about it in those terms, can you really afford to ignore the power of AI and leave all of that money sitting on the floor? And I think that's where I'll pass it back.
Thank you so much, Corey and Bobby. That was very thought-provoking. Now I'd like to hit you with some of my own questions. And I think I want to start just going back to basics a little bit. Can you, I think a lot of us in the supply chain industry are still struggling to really understand what artificial intelligence is and what it means specifically for supply chain management. How would you describe it, Corey, to a non-technical audience? Maybe there's an anecdote you can offer.
Yeah, certainly. I like to equate our send product overall. So you heard me mention just at the close there of talking about moving beyond invoice auditing and then allowing AI to do things like selecting the right carrier for an individual shipment. And there's a lot of solutions out there that do carrier selection. When you put AI into that process, I equate it to how we look at Google Maps and how that's evolved since the days of just reading a fixed map. You could plan your route by going through the way my dad still does, which is to get that route mapper out, highlight the appropriate route, and hope that on your journey, nothing goes wrong. When you include AI into that, it's really taking a look at the way maybe some of you are planning your route home today, taking a look at point to point, being given multiple options, making those decisions based on what's best for you, but also giving you that update. And this is the resilience piece of what happens when something gets blocked. Do I have an alternative? Should I have chosen another provider? So when we bring our AI to the story, you've got that flexibility, that ability on the simple idea of moving a parcel from point A to point B with the constraints that make sense for your business to give you the best desired outcome.
Fantastic. Bobby, what's your non-technical explanation of how AI can help in supply chain management?
Well, it just gives me a better picture. Most of my experiences managing globally, hundreds of countries at a time, it's not feasible for me to be able to make decisions in Singapore or Japan or Latin America just off the cusp of my intellect. It's a matter of really understanding and empowering data to make great decisions. And that's what AI does to me in my non-technical discussion.
Right. So it's really about supporting better decisions altogether. And I think what I found particularly interesting was I sort of love the idea that basically you can come in, Corey, as Seven Bridges and almost immediately point to some erroneous charges from a freight provider and say, look, you're losing money right here. I think I was sort of thinking about a good analogy, and it's almost like, you can get a guy to come over to your house with an infrared camera and see where you're losing energy that you couldn't possibly have seen with the naked eye. And that sort of, to me, feels sort of quite similar. But so to that point, I mean, you're obviously delivering value, it sounds like, pretty much from day one. But, a lot of companies have a lot of IT projects. They have an IT department that's often not necessarily welcoming of an outside technology provider coming in. So why would a company dedicate IT resources to implement a solution like yours when they're already consumed by other projects?
Yeah, it's a good point. And I have massive amounts of respect for IT teams working in enterprises globally. That long laundry list of projects to focus on and to concentrate on doesn't need another one thrown on top of the pile.
Nice. Yes.
The reality is we look at our business in the way that we introduce clients to the platform overall, and we're very purposeful in that in the first phase. And that first phase for some organizations is as short as 1 month, as long as 2 years, is start on a non-integrated approach into a client's ecosystem. So we don't really touch IT in the first instance. That world of auditing data and building value and building momentum and starting to frame up what could become a really empowering digital twin is all done without necessarily having to touch our client's IT team. So one, they tend to like us on that side, that we can deliver the first set of the relationship without ever having to consume an IT resource, aside from maybe some time in a workshop. Mm-hmm. And then the second piece is we want to create value right out of the gate. So we want this system, this platform, this ability to get that end-to-end visibility to pay for itself. And the best way to do that is to start to reclaiming the costs that carriers are erroneously charging you for. Right. That stat's not getting smaller. 1 in 5 carrier invoices contain some level of error. The naked eye can't spot it, and we can. And I think that's really the powerful piece.
Wow, that's amazing. I wanted to dig a little bit into the digital twin thing, because I know it's a term that's been bandied around a lot. But Bobby, could you give us a sort of beginner's guide to what a digital twin is and how it works?
Well, for me, digital twin is just an enhancement to what we're doing, making sure that we have a twin of what we're doing and showing the picture of what we're looking at from from that capability is far-reaching to how we build out our future landscape in that regards.
Right, and it's kind of, Corey, it's a sort of a low risk way of running different sort of what if scenarios or digging through data without actually having an impact on the day-to-day operations of the company, right? Because you're taking a mirror, as it were, and separating off all this data where you can play with it as much as you want without having an impact on core operations. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So it gives you a bit of a playground to do a number of what if scenario planning pieces. We've seen some really interesting ones in the last 3 years. It can be used both online and offline. And I think that's what probably sets us out slightly different than other technology providers. Those things that you play with, you can put into action really quite easily if the organization's in a live environment on our platform. So I think one of the things, like an interesting one, is what happens if I move my distribution center from the UK to Europe? Show me what that impact looks like before I make that decision. People are using the platform for interesting other message or projects as well. Things like, what's the carbon footprint output of my current network? How can I play with that? If I have a 2030 goal, what are some of the steps I can do right now to really start to put a dent into that? So, yeah.
Right. So it really kind of frees you up to think big, or just play thought experiments out and see what the impact might be. Do you find that when you bring this to customers that they get a little bolder about rethinking their supply chains?
I think in general, at first they get a bit overwhelmed. But then there's that aha moment, that moment of simply based on invoice data, you're starting to map my network. And now I get to do some playing with that. And there's usually something within that audit discussion and with that relationship we have with clients where the things that they thought they heard from customer care start to play out in what's happening in their actual network. Things like, where's my parcel? Understanding where carriers are falling down, understanding that ahead of the curve, and then playing out what happens if I change that. Will I get a better response rate? Will I get fewer failed deliveries? Will I have better transparency in terms of where that parcel is on its actual delivery?
Right, that's really interesting. Bobby, do you see the capabilities of AI, including things like digital twins, is that causing a shift in mentality in supply chain management? Are people being able to think a little differently?
It certainly is, with the emergence of it and it becoming more and more common, and it's proving itself to be a benefit. More IT capabilities or more IT companies or IT groups within the organizations are working towards this, and we're working more closely with our IT companies to start bringing that into our operations.
That's fantastic. So now we talked a lot today about pharmaceuticals as a vertical in a case study, but what other verticals are using AI in supply chain, and exactly what are they using it for? Bobby, perhaps you could talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, well, most of my experience is in pharma, but I have many friends in different parts of the industries. But you see it in automotive, you see it in retail, you see it in high tech, many different aspects. It's not just a one industry solution. It can impact any broad aspect of any different type of industry, and more industries are really looking into this or even adopting these types of solutions.
Fantastic. I mean, basically, if you're in the business of moving stuff around, this technology can help. Corey, so what are you seeing other than obviously the looking for erroneous freight charges and correcting that, and looking for patterns in customer service complaints, perhaps? What other specific uses are you seeing AI getting traction with in different verticals in supply chain management?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things is if you look at our roster of clients today and the folks who are knocking on the door for this early audit analysis piece, Bobby's right. They come in all shapes and sizes and can be everything from high fashion retail to standard retail to fast moving consumer goods and manufacturing. Pharmaceutical is taking a tremendous amount of priority for us as well. Just knowing the need to get product moved efficiently on time without failure. Across all verticals, across all industries, and I think what's interesting about that is, as an organization at a platform level, that gives clients who come on board with us a unique advantage, because we have all that customer data sitting across the platform in an anonymized way that's helping to inform decisions along a prospective client's journey. So if they want to know, is my particular lane performance from London to Berlin an issue for me, or is it an issue more broadly? We're able to point those things out as they build up where they want to take their network.
Wow. That's really interesting. So you're bringing a lot of insight to the party. That's great. So we talked about resilience a little bit, current buzzword of the industry. How does this technology, how does AI really make my supply chain more resilient against things like COVID or Russia invading Ukraine or whatever that you just can't predict? How does it help with responding to those sorts of, or even anticipating those sorts of stuff?
Sure. I'd like to say I work for an organization that can see the future, and we know those things. The reality of what we're putting together in our capability allows people to react much faster. So the things that happen in parts of the world, our clients are allowed and able to, through the platform, simulate what a blackout event looks like. So what happens when I have to put a manufacturing site dark? What's the impact on my network overall? How do I reroute things? And I talked about that offline online scenario. So if you're offline planning it and then you're like, that's the decision we have to go with, you can immediately instruct the platform of that's what's happening and see it actually play out. The resilient component of it beyond that for me is really, I talked 2 years ago when I joined into Seven Bridges, a lot of the conversations were around, I'm really happy with my carrier performs well, and it was spoken in a singular term. I used
Right.
The reality is the best solution for any organization isn't likely to put all eggs in one basket. The challenge becomes, well, which eggs do I put in which baskets? And you need a platform that's able to play that back to you, to say, if you choose FedEx for X, Y, and Z, this is what we will have seen. This is what the net impact would be. If you're using DHL for A, B, and C, this is the way it works. And a system that can play with all those permutations to give you the best next step, which is to go to a procurement exercise to bring those partners on board with real data, with real rates, and then enable it in the platform to actually send those pieces out.
Wow, that's fantastic. That sounds a bit more resilient to me. Bobby, tell me what is your opinion about the way that resilience has become such a buzzword, and is it something that we can actually achieve, or is it just we're getting back to this making better decisions?
That is the buzzword I'm hearing, whether it's capabilities in AI, whether it's in risk management. That's what everybody is talking about. What's best in class, and resilience is what that new key word is. I would say that there's different stages of it, and and different companies are in different positions of being best class. And in order to do that, it's really defining the principles of what you want to achieve to that state of maturity. And I think for me, making sure that you take time and understand where you want to be is just as important as the journey. But if you're not thinking that, if you're not putting the right tools in, there's no way to achieve that. You cannot be resilient on just working alone. And you have to have those standards and capabilities, and then you have to plan towards it.
Right. And you can't do it from an Excel spreadsheet, it sounds like. Fantastic. So, so just to bring things a little bit back into the news again, it looks like we're heading for a recession. Is it what's the good argument for devoting increasingly scant resources and getting people on board with spending more on tech right now?
Great question. Yeah,
I'm sure you'll have a great answer to that.
It's a good question. I think that, you know, when you talk to us at Seven Bridges, we're certainly not about, you know, taking jobs away from individuals, but the one of the things that we do is make our teams more effective and more efficient. So if we can drive a lot of that menial work that's being done today, especially in accounting divisions and finance divisions, where they're one of the things we didn't touch on in the overall discussion was what we're able to do from an accounting perspective to help people automatically GL code invoice costs in their world, which for a lot of organizations is a full-time job, 60-hour a week, just pulling that information into a platform. When we're able to do that at a touch of a button, it frees up people in those teams to go and actually work on the things that are going to drive their business forward. So I think relying on AI and tech helps to free up resources to focus on the bigger picture, the better thing. And the second part of that is, which is why we don't necessarily start the discussion around automatically sending product or running full-fledged simulations or you know, plugging the platform in through the entire journey, is to start small and to start to work with your invoice data to reclaim cost. Because if you can put more money back to the bottom line,
Right.
that's the recession proofness you need. You need to be, we talk about financial resilience. You need to be a financially resilient organization.
Right.
And finding those nooks and crannies is what will help most organizations through the short term.
Right. Fantastic. Great answer. Bobby, what would you say? How can AI help us weather the recession a bit better?
Well, it's looking at what is going to give you the most return on your investments and the least amount of effort, you know, and automating that process where you can start seeing savings. You know, that's somewhat how you battle that recession. Corey mentioned, you know, IT and the use of resources. We're all working hard in many different onsets. Bringing in a new item, the first thing is, oh no, here we go again, I forgot something else to do. But if you have something that's really tangible, that is self-sufficient, you have a company that can come in and really start working for you with minimal needs on your part, but
Right.
then bring back that savings, you know, right on the start, versus a project that takes 1 to 2 years to give that ROI back. It's something that really seriously is something to look at.
Yes, thank you, Bobby. I mean, that's a great point, that this doesn't have to. I think people are so used to IT systems and changes being, you know, 1 to 5 year projects that cost huge amounts of money and sometimes get abandoned halfway through, and it's a waste of everybody's time and money. But this is much more modular and agile, that you can come in and just start with something pretty simple and get return on investment immediately, and then make, you know, continue to see savings as you expand out from there. Well, thank you, gentlemen. I think we're going to move into our session with questions and answers from the audience. Once again, audience, please submit your questions using the tab at the bottom of your screen. And we'll not be using people's titles or company names, so you should feel free to ask anything you like. If you don't see your question answered during the webinar, please be assured the Seven Bridges team will reach out to you offline. So I've got a nice sort of, again, back to basics question here from one audience member. What is the difference between programming and AI? I mean, it's all just code, isn't it? I don't know, Corey, do you want to take that first?
Sure. Yeah, so AI is a pretty broad term overall, which I think we've described through the presentation. But I think of AI as the ability to take into account thousands, if not millions and hundreds of thousands of pieces of data, synthesize it, ask questions of it, interrogate it to spit out solutions, resolutions, things to move to the next step. Programming is what all the guys on the third floor do day in, day out, to figure out what are the ways to bring data into our organization. What do we need to be doing to synthesize it? How do we run simulations? So I look at programming as kind of the code language of how we get things done, but the AI is the environment in and of itself of creating the outcomes that are required for our organizations to move forward.
Right, fantastic. That's a great distinction. Bobby, do you have anything to add to that?
To me, I just want it to get done, whether it's through programming and AI. It's my non-technical message to it is let's work through the process. Programming, is good, but I think from the AI standpoint, it's really taking that data and meshing it with what you need to make better decision making. That can be a form of code, but it's really the output is what I seek and is what is important to me.
Right. And
If
I
you-
know I promised I wouldn't introduce the word code
That's fine.
into this,
I'm okay,
but
I'm okay with that this time, Helen, because I had an analogy this morning that I used with my son. So my son's
Fantastic.
11th birthday today, and he asked a very similar question, which was, what is coding? I want to get involved in coding, and what you work in AI, and that's fantastic. So he's just started to learn the guitar. So the way I referred to it was, programming and coding is all about the strings and how you tune the instrument. AI is the song you will play. So it's that the things you need to get to the outcome that you want.
Wonderful. That's a great analogy. I love that. Fantastic. So let's dig into it. There's some more specific questions here. One for Bobby here. What makes this any different from other invoice auditing solutions that you've seen before?
Yeah, that's a great question. You see a lot of companies, or I would say a handful of companies, they come in, you can put your contracts in place, and you can have an audit come up with potential savings. The difference in this is that the AI piece stores the information that stores the different capabilities, so you make better decisions going forward. So you can see savings through pure audits, but this is an extension of audit, in that the AI gives you more capabilities and better decision making. You could, let me put it as an example. If you have I think Corey mentioned going from the UK to Europe. You have an auditing company that comes in and they say you were charged $100 more. Well, you'll keep shipping that same lane with that same carrier. Where you build up AI, you can see that, oh, they're not getting any better. You can, where the AI capability here, it enhances your decision making, where you say, oh, I need to change that carrier, or this carrier is better performing on this lane versus the other. So that's part of what you're going to see better from that than just a pure auditing company.
Brilliant. Thank you. And now we've got a question that I love, these questions, because they address the elephant in the room: data quality issues. How do you address that? More than data, the data quality is the big issue, says this person. It could be the upstream process and data mismatch from different supply chain entities, so external partners, obviously, and not knowing which is to be trusted. This is a huge subject, I know, but perhaps we could dig into it a little bit. Corey, how do you deal with data quality issues?
Sure, and I'll be honest, most of the conversations I start with the sales team, and we're sitting down with the prospect, many don't go on camera in the first instance, and if they do, they're sitting here like this. You don't want my, they try to sell it against it. You don't want my data. It's sitting somewhere. It's not in a format you can use. And yeah, we have a preferred way to receive data. We have preferred formats. We have preferred ways just to smooth the process. And if you're able to get there, wonderful. The other thing that's slightly different about our model is we're hands-on. So if you need us to go get your data from your provider, we're I'm in 50% calls doing that and 50% calls solutioning. And we're really here to steward the right data into the platform. We don't want bad data in the platform as much as you don't. But the reality is that can't be the data overwhelm point. That can't be the reason you don't do something.
Got it.
This is where you need and will benefit from having more eyes on that data. If you have questions of that data already, we will have those questions too, and let's talk about them. Let's get it into an environment that we can interrogate it, because sitting at it, looking at it in all its formats, not trusting it, those are all emotional things. Those are all things that will tie you to the current state. You want to get to the future state. And to get to the future state, you need to have I'll point to them again, the folks on the third floor, really starting to pull that stuff apart and interrogating it and asking you the questions, asking the providers the questions. And 99.9% of the time, we get to a harmonization point where it all makes sense.
Wow, that's amazing. But Bobby, do you find that data quality is part of the sort of brain freeze that most companies are in when you come to consult them? Yeah.
More often than not. But Corey brings up a great point. I mean, at some point you're going to be challenged why your data, from the C-suite, why can't you make these type decisions? Why can you not improve? So you can't let that to be a handicap. And it might be a process, but that ultimately, if you work on bad data, why are you even looking to try to improve? I mean, you're not going to be able to. So that's got to be a big piece of it.
Right. Sure. Yeah. So I mean, it sounds you guys have to do quite a lot of hand holding and reassuring. Here's a interesting. I've never seen this question before. Who owns the digital twin? I'm assuming it's the client, but.
Who owns the digital twin? That's a great question. It's your data. So it's your digital twin. What it's influenced by is all the other things we bring to the table. So that broad scale set of data that sits above your digital twin, so you can interrogate and ask questions of it. But it's your digital twin. Access to that digital twin is through our platform. So if the question is, what happens if I work with you and I want to take my digital twin somewhere else? That's a slightly different conversation because it's in our technology and it's there for you to work with. But yeah, it's yours. It's your, nobody else is going to use your digital twin. Right.
Super. Thank you. So here's another interesting question. It's sort of a nice practical one. So you bring your Seven Bridges platform into an organization, and the carriers and the logistics service providers get audited, and they have to get a bit more honest or meticulous about how they're charging you. Isn't that just a one-time fix and they're going to behave themselves after that? What's the long-term value here, Corey?
I'd like to say it will get better. The reality is it's a complex world. And carrier partners, freight forwarders, like all those organizations are focused on what they do really, really well, which is deliver your good from A to B, and to manage that process in the middle. They're not investing at the same rate and in the same rate that us technology companies are to improve that experience. For them to get there, they would need to invest massively in their billing platform. When you look at specialty providers specifically, and this is kind of Bobby's realm, there's literally thousands of lines on those invoices, and within each individual invoice, and I'm happy to share a demo with anybody who wants to walk into Seven Bridges for that demo. The reality is inside that invoice, there are a number of permutations that are all set against it, whether they're spot rates or physical rate cards, that they just can't get better at. There's human error into it, there's system errors, and they're working on Excel too, right? So the reality is this will always be a need. But I think what I want people to focus about is it's not about holding the carriers to account in an aha moment like most audit software. We're not an audit software organization. You'll never see that in our mission statement. Our desire is to use that to help you pay for progressing technology in your organization and getting the right response from partners. The audit piece is important, and no, they're not going to get better at it.
Okay, great, thanks. Well, we're running short on time, so we've got time for one more question, and it is this. And I'm going to ask Bobby first, and then Corey. What prevents most organizations from getting started with AI and implementing an AI-based solution for their supply chain? What can the audience do today to take that first step in the right direction towards AI? Bobby, what would be your advice?
It's a great question, Helen. It's the time that we have. It's the resources constraints that we have. It's the seeing an IT project and being overwhelmed with how do we get started.
Corey, what's getting in the way, and what's your advice?
Oh, I'll start with the latter. My advice is just get started. I mean, the reality is you're sitting on enough information today that with working with a partner will help you start your road to implementing AI. You've got it. If you don't have it, we're able to help you go get it. But that data is ready and it's there and it's available. We're able to help unlock that. And what gets in the way is people need to take a sense of belief that by doing something today will start me on my journey. It is a marathon. Let's start with the sprints. Let's get things going in the right way from an audit perspective. And the first best step is get in touch. Let us show you what your data looks like.
Okay, really. Great. That's a great answer. I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Thank you to Corey from Seven Bridges and Bobby from Professional Supply Chain Resources. And a special thanks to everyone for participating. You, the audience, are very important, and we love the questions. I think we've learned a lot today about how artificial intelligence actually can help with supply chain management, not just in the pharmaceutical vertical, but across the board. We had a lot of questions today, and we'll be answering the ones we didn't get to with you offline. There's a QR code on your screen just now with some contact information. But if you can't do QR codes, you're also going to be getting an email later with a link to view the webinar on demand, and you can share that with people if you wish. And there will also be information about how to contact Seven Bridges if you have more questions. Thanks so much for your participation. Stay safe, stay happy, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Ellen.